Welcome to this Rapid Fire Explainer. Today, we're doing something highly ambitious. We're going to completely demystify the entire world of economics, literally going from the daily choices you make all the way up to the massive global systems running our world. And we're doing it fast. No dense textbooks here, just clear concepts. Let's dive right in.
So here's our roadmap. We'll start with the problem of scarcity, move on to markets, supply and demand, then tackle money, banks, and finance. After that, we'll look at macroeconomics like GDP and inflation, scale up to governments and global trade, and finally wrap up with human behavior and systems.
All right, part 1, the problem of scarcity.
We really have to begin with the fundamental problem of existence itself. You know, you're a human who wants stuff. Food, shelter, maybe a slightly larger TV than your cousin has. But here's the hard truth. Infinite pizza and infinite stuff, they just simply do not exist. Because of that, we face scarcity. There's literally just not enough to go around. And because of scarcity, we face opportunity cost. Every single choice you make means you're not doing something else. The opportunity cost of you watching this explainer right now is giving up your time watching, say, internet cat fails. I promise you, though, this will be worth it.
Now, because we can't have everything, we have to trade. Imagine you have 10 apples and I have 5 bananas. We trade and it's a win-win. Honestly, even if you're allergic to bananas, it's still a win-win. You just might need an EpiPen. But this leads us to comparative advantage. You don't have to be the best at everything. You just have to figure out what you're the least worst at proportionally. If you specialize in that one thing, you become economically useful, and everybody benefits from the trade.
Moving right along to part 2, markets, supply, and demand.
Let's see how taking all of those concepts, scarcity, opportunity cost, and trade, and shaking them all up in a box invents something entirely new, a market. Markets run purely on incentives. Buyers are incentivized by lower prices, right? If pizza's $1, you're going to eat 7 of them. That's demand. Sellers, on the other hand, are incentivized by higher prices. If they can sell a pizza for $100, they'll make a ton of them. That's supply. Where these two competing desires meet is the magical equilibrium price. Everyone who wants to buy finds someone who wants to sell. Well, unless the government slaps down a price control and tries to ignore economics entirely, which, rarely goes well.
And this brilliantly illustrates the concept of the invisible hand. It essentially coordinates millions of people through prices and incentives. The market doesn't care about fairness or your feelings or if you stubbed your toe this morning. It's just math, desire, and desperation working together in silence.
So how does the invisible hand actually make things? To understand why your avocado toast costs $14, you got to look at this Rube Goldsberg machine of a supply chain. It combines land, like the actual avocados and wheat, labor, which is the human effort of harvesting and, pretending to smile at the cafe, and capital, like the espresso machines and tractors. Together, they create output. And if that system is highly productive, you get a lot of toast for very little effort. If not, you're waiting 4 hours for a burnt egg.
Okay, part 3, money, banks, and finance.
Let's dive into the mechanism that keeps these complex supply chains actually moving without grinding to a complete halt. Money acts as economic lube. Without it, we'd be stuck trying to trade a goat for Wi-Fi. It's a medium of exchange, a unit of account to tally things up, and a store of value. And what's super fascinating is that money isn't just cash. Historically, it's been cow-shaped rocks, paper, and briefly, NFTs. The only thing that actually makes money real is trust. If enough people believe a thing is money, it's money.
Central banks manipulate this trust. They basically have 2 main levers. They can use tight monetary policy, raising interest rates to make borrowing expensive and cool down inflation. Or they use loose monetary policy, lowering rates to make money cheap and heat the economy up. Meanwhile, commercial banks create money out of thin air through fractional reserve banking. They're just typing numbers into a screen for your mortgage and really hoping everyone doesn't ask for their cash back at the exact same time.
So where do people put all this money? The financial markets. You can buy stocks, which are basically slices of a company. You can buy bonds, which are boring, safe-ish IOUs from the government. You can play with derivatives. Those are bets on bets that occasionally blow up the global economy. Or you can dive into crypto, which serves as decentralized, math-powered casino chips. Ultimately, it's all about trading claims on future money.
Now for part 4, macroeconomics, GDP and inflation.
We've talked a lot about stuff being made, traded, and financed. But how do we actually measure the size of it all? We use GDP. Now the trick here is that GDP only counts final goods. If you count the flour used to make the bread and then count the bread itself, you're double counting, and that's totally cheating.
It is a really useful metric, but keep in mind it's pretty flawed. It completely ignores unpaid labor, black market activity, and whether the citizens are actually, happy.
While we can calculate GDP in 3 different ways, by production, income, or expenditure, the numbers don't always tell the whole story of economic health. You really have to watch out for the business cycles. A boom is great, a recession is bad. But the absolute worst is stagflation. That's where the economy collapses, but prices go up anyway. It's basically a depression, but with higher prices and way more existential dread.
And speaking of higher prices, what happens if a government just decides to print money to fix their problems? You get hyperinflation. Seriously, think about this number, 89.7 sextillion%. That is the actual annual inflation rate of Zimbabwe in 2008. They printed $100 trillion bills, and you still couldn't even afford lunch. Prices rise so incredibly fast, your wallet practically catches fire before you can even open it.
All right, Part 5, Governments and Global Trade.
Let's scale up even further here. We need to talk about the absolute giants operating in these markets, governments. They have to figure out how to pay for public goods, infrastructure, and $80 million military jets that crash during test flights. Because governments don't typically sell products, they extract mandatory slices of your life through various taxes. We're talking income, corporate, property, and even excise taxes on your bad habits like alcohol and cigarettes. This funds the streetlights and fills the potholes. But they almost always spend more than they take in, creating deficits. To cover it, they borrow money via bonds, racking up massive national debts that run into the tens of trillions of dollars.
Now, obviously, governments aren't operating in isolation. On the global stage, countries rely heavily on international trade, exploiting comparative advantage on a massive scale. But this whole setup relies on incredibly fragile supply chains. Remember when one stuck boat in the Suez Canal cost the global economy $10 billion a day? Yeah. Plus, international trade requires swapping currencies in the foreign exchange market, where values just float and shift wildly based on inflation, interest rates, trade balances, and honestly is sometimes just social media tweets.
Finally, Part 6, Human Behavior and Systems. Let's zoom out to the overarching systems governing all of this, and simultaneously zoom all the way back in on the incredibly flawed human brain that's running them. Traditional economics assumes that you and I are perfectly rational beings. Behavioral economics proves that is a hilarious lie. We are chaos merchants. Because of loss aversion, we hate losing $20 far more than we enjoy winning $20. Because of sunk costs, we will sit through a terrible Marvel sequel purely because we already spent the time watching the first 8. We are naturally bad at money, which is why apps and governments have to nudge us with things like auto-enrolled savings.
And because we human beings are so deeply flawed, no single economic system works perfectly. Pure capitalism brings absolutely incredible innovation, but sharp inequality. Strict command socialism aims for equality but often ends in state planning failures and breadlines. The reality is that we all live in mixed economies today. The United States heavily utilizes government subsidies and public safety nets, while China features booming stock exchanges and billionaires.
Every single economic system in the world is just desperately trying to answer 3 core questions. What do we make, how do we make it, and who gets it? We've gone from the scarcity of pizza to avocado supply chains, all the way to multi-trillion-dollar debts. And the truth is, no one has nailed the perfect answer to these questions yet. Everything is a trade-off. Knowing that the entire system is completely driven by human choices, my question to you is, what choice will you make next?